Hey there, Gulf Coast. I'm NBC 15 Chief Meteorologist Thomas Geboy. Today we have a conversation about Hurricane Katrina for you. So I want to go ahead and introduce you to meteorologist Jeffrey Medlin. Jeffrey, how are you doing
Thomas?
Today?
Good to see you. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's good that you're here. Really appreciate you being here. And if anybody in the Mobile area has followed weather closely at all, really in the last 20 to 30 years plus, they probably come across your name because you were the meteorologist in charge for quite some time for the National Weather Service in Mobile, but you've also had a multitude of other roles, even within the National Weather Service.
Yes, I came to Mobile in 1994 as the station's first science and operations officer after our modernization.
Okay.
And that was for 20 years. And then eventually, well, I was on a 5-year plan. But 20 years later, I became the meteorologist in charge for 8 years, and I've been in 5 other states across the United States.
Okay, so I think it's fair to say that you have a vast experience when it comes to working within the Weather Service, and a lot of that experience, or some of that experience, comes back to 2005. And I wanted to bring you in because I wanted to speak with you about Hurricane Katrina, because you played a very pivotal role when it came to Katrina.
Yeah, that's correct, Thomas. First of all, Katrina was obviously a devastating weather event that our country will never forget, not just this area. And, the thing about Katrina was that in the modern era, we had not really experienced anything like that in a long time, and especially here locally, with the amount of tools that we had and the newly spun up National Weather Service office in Mobile.
Okay, and then what was your role in 2005 when Katrina came in?
My role in 2005 is I was the science and operations officer, and we were fully prepared for the possibility that Katrina could bring the communications down either at our office or the Weather Service in New Orleans, or Slidell, if you will. And my role was commanding our office operations until the dreaded phone call was received. Okay. The call that actually said, you are now both the National Weather Service in New Orleans and Mobile.
Okay, so I think a lot of people at home probably don't realize that for an extended period of time, the National Weather Service in Mobile was also the National Weather Service in New Orleans.
That is absolutely correct. In fact, for 21 days. Okay. We were able, because of a robust backup plan that we have been honing for at least 1 to 3 years, we're able to flawlessly take the call and begin picking up all of their forecast and warning services.
Okay. Now, before we get any further into it, because obviously we're going to talk about that quite a bit, I want you to take me back to 2005 and the lead up to Hurricane Katrina. Because Hurricane Katrina, before it crossed over Florida, depression became a Category 1 hurricane, and then it moves out into the Gulf, and everyone goes to sleep one night, and then the next morning, it's a completely different situation than a lot of folks were thinking.
Yeah, that's correct. Also, to understand that and fully capture the answer to that question, we have to actually go back to Hurricane Ivan in 2004, which we pretty much took on the chin here locally. We got into the western eye wall. And then to have something like that the very next year that was the magnitude of Katrina with all of the impacts, that was daunting and began to make you wonder whether you were being picked on by Mother Nature, yeah, so to speak. So,
and then Hurricane Ivan, I mean, there was such a benchmark storm for us. Major hurricane, yes, comes into Baldwin County. But Ivan, we were talking before this interview that Ivan might have ultimately helped the response for Katrina. Can you kind of build on that?
It did. As I hearken back to my earlier comments about honing and perfecting backup operations, there were some things we were able to learn in Ivan that allowed us to improve those items to be able to more flawlessly flip the switch, so to speak, and become both offices. There was a lot of tightening up and testing of things that we thought would work before that maybe did not work as well, and then things we discovered along the way with Ivan. And Weather Service operations was evolving at the time because it seemed like the operations were becoming increasingly more transparent to the community versus just internal. And a person from the public sitting around and waiting for a product to come from the Weather Service. The social media aspect kind of opened up like a play-by-play or every little single move. So we were able to capitalize on that as well. So
it was kind of like the first delving into maybe having those different tools, including just kind of the start of social media, where it might have been a little bit easier to kind of get the message out and the public's able to kind of see what y'all are doing. That
is correct. And also, to go back to your earlier question, when we started seeing Katrina did what it ultimately did when it crossed into the southeast Gulf of Mexico, we had that sinking feeling, just like we had in Ivan. And we knew we were in for it. We didn't know at the time exactly where it was going to go because the cone was so wide. We all felt pretty strongly that it would come close to Mobile, but more likely pass just a little bit to the west. And we knew it was forecast to become a very large diameter storm. And because of that, we knew we were on what's called the dirty side of the storm with the nasty impacts. And we knew, simply due to the larger diameter, that we needed to be fully prepared as far east as Destin, Florida as well. So
well, and that brings up the conversation of you guys taking over for the National Weather Service in New Orleans, because it's one thing to take over for an office that's getting direct impacts, but because of how large Katrina was, it wasn't just the National Weather Service in New Orleans impact area, which is southeast Louisiana through the Mississippi Gulf Coast, but Mobile County, Baldwin County seeing significant impacts. So you're dealing with impacts locally for your forecast area, but then you're also having to get those products out for the folks in southeast Louisiana and along the Mississippi Gulf Coast.
Yeah, that's correct. And we remembered very well at the time what we had to go through with Ivan, preparing ourselves and our personal lives to be able to be at work for sometimes 12, 16, 20 hours a day. And we were prepared that some people on the very last one at landfall, the last shift, may not be able to go home. They may be in the office for days. So we knew that kind of going into it. And like I said, you had that same feeling that this was going to be a similar outcome as far as the magnitude of what was going on.
Yeah, and working for both offices, you're also in coordination with local emergency managers. You're in coordination with the federal government. So you're probably on the phone quite a bit because, I mean, southern Mobile County, especially Bayou La Battery, Dauphin Island, got hit really hard. But then you're also having to be in coordination with the folks from southeast Louisiana, the Mississippi Gulf Coast.
Right, and in the Weather Service these days, you have something that's called decision support for those folks, where you lay out the most likely scenario, be it flooding, be it tornadoes, all of the impacts that go along with a tropical cyclone. And that is what you brief on to help decision makers be able to make decisions. And I really say that the National Weather Service in Mobile was doing decision support well before most of the National Weather Service knew what that was. And then we followed that up with Deepwater Horizon that went on for months, not just 1 month. We rotated 85 people through the office from all around the country, as did Slidell. So that really opened up. It was a time of evolution into our modern day services that we now have.
Okay, and then along with running coordination, one thing that we have talked about and one thing that you sent me that I didn't necessarily realize is when you're working with the coordination with the folks in southeast Louisiana, especially New Orleans, given the flooding and people having to be rescued from roofs. You guys were the main point when it came to working with the Coast Guard.
That's correct. I'm sure that everyone remembers the live footage on national news because a lot of the local stations were down. Their comms were messed up as well, that were in New Orleans per se. So I'm sure they remember people being plucked from the rooftops. Well, a lot of the Coast Guard helicopters that you saw doing that briefing for when to fly and when not to fly, that was being provided directly by the National Weather Service in Mobile.
So,
Yes.
so I mean, you guys kind of had your hand in everything, and all at the same time, working the recovery here. And then also, I also wanted you to build off of the impacts that the staff had at National Weather Service in Mobile, because as you talked about, wasn't even sure if you guys would have enough gas to be able to get home every single night, and you guys actually having to go through the storms yourselves.
That's correct. It actually got down to really like the last day for some of us, going back and forth to work. We did have some other weather service offices step up and help get us from inland locations, help bring us some gasoline to put in our vehicles. But there were a few of us that were literally down to our last trip to work, so to speak. And then about that time, 7-8 days later, some of the gas stations began to light back up, and we were able to be okay with it. But the backup operations continued.
Yeah. So how long? So was it 21 days that you guys were
It was 21 days. The employees at the National Weather Service in Slidell, they were in the office for quite a few days with some of their families. There were security concerns from people roaming around in the community over there, and they were in no way able to even begin to learn how to rebuild their lives.
Yeah.
We were communicating via satellite phone, and it got so bad at one point as we had to have a person monitor the satellite phone for a call because we couldn't get in touch with them to figure out when to coordinate our two satellite phone calls.
Yeah. And
So,
and going back to that, because National Weather Service means in Slidell got hit so hard.
yes.
Even after they're able to come back online, with how bad 2005 was as a whole as a season, I'm guessing there were probably conversations that, okay, if something else comes, the whole National Weather Service needs to be ready to take care of New Orleans and Mobile.
That's correct. We were concerned with the vulnerability of flooding of comms lines for any storm, and it was being watched like a hawk. And we really got lucky. We really got lucky for the rest of the season. As you know, we went well into the Greek alphabet.
Yeah.
After that. So one thing I did want to mention, when I first got the call and we were writing our hurricane local statements, and by the way, our staff had good strong leadership from the forecasters. It wasn't just the management.
Yeah.
They really knew what they were doing. They really embraced the backup plan. But one of the things that we began to notice, we had a person on station that began to see on the internet that people were taking hatchets and anything like an axe up into their attic to cut holes in their roof. And we were able to take that information and write it in our statements and pass it along via other means as well. Because even our ham radio operators were not getting anything out of that area at the time.
Well, and that's probably one of the first examples of things like that happening, because now that's common practice.
That's right. Exactly.
And that's all from the National Weather Service in Mobile starting that.
That's where it came from. We started seeing that, and a person literally said, hey, we need to get this into our statements. And we certainly started putting it in our statements and passing that along.
Okay, and let's go back to you taking the call.
Yes.
From the regional headquarters.
Correct.
And just kind of what your thoughts were when you were taking that call saying, hey, New Orleans is down. You guys need to step up and take over.
Well, the first thought I had is when I turned around after I hung up the phone and looked at the folks and said, hey, we're now New Orleans. It's confirmed from the Southern Region headquarters. The first thing is we all knew what our roles were. You may have a role for the Weather Service Mobile, but now your role just expanded to also be that for New Orleans as well. And we had to shuffle a few things around to make it work. And, we were not sure who we were going to get in on the next shift because that was right in the throes of things where it was bad in our area too.
Yeah, and I'm sure for a brief period of time, with how bad things got, especially in southern Mobile County, there probably was a thought in y'all's head that there's a chance that we might be going down for an extended period of time too.
You're exactly correct, and we got lucky. That's correct. The short answer.
Well, and I guess who would have been on standby if both Mobile and New Orleans would have gone down?
Well, we had secondary backups.
Okay.
We had Tallahassee. New Orleans and Mobile were primaries for one another, but our secondary backup was Tallahassee. And there's even a third level of backup, and the third level of backup was planned to be way across the country, was Corpus Christi. Okay. So it was figured that you wouldn't have your first three of your two all along one part of the coast. The third one would be from somewhere else.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and going back to you being two offices, to help folks at home understand just how large of an area that you cover, because on a daily basis,
Yes.
the National Weather Service in Mobile covers from Mobile County to Jackson County along the Mississippi-Alabama line, all the way
Yes.
over to Destin, then up to Highway 84. But then when you add National Weather Service New Orleans, you're adding another huge slice of land to cover.
Plus the marine area.
Yes.
Yes, and people may not also realize that, in addition to that, we do fire weather and aviation, and then all of the watches and warnings as well. So we got lucky because we had a period of quiet weather after that.
But it was hot.
But it was extremely hot, and heat deaths were a concern, but due to poor ventilation and the fact that people could not cool their bodies at night,
Yeah.
including the employees working at Mobile.
Yeah, and that was a big problem everywhere.
Yes.
And then going back to those local statements, because I also wanted to touch on that, I think a lot of people remember just some of the verbiage that came out with some of those
Yes.
local statements. And leading up to the storm, there were definitely some very strongly worded ones from the National Weather Service in New Orleans, but you guys are also writing that once they go down, saying this is life-threatening situations, and just maybe expand a little bit on some of the stuff that maybe you had to write or some of your colleagues did.
Yeah, and I think the main thing was that the recovery is not going to be tomorrow, next week, or maybe even next month. Mm-hmm. It might be numerous months that, some structures are uninhabitable. And I think that's the main impact that was on everyone's mind. It's not going to just go away tomorrow.
Yeah.
And, in the gotta have it right now society that we live in, that's hard to grasp. It's hard for all of us to grasp because we're all human beings. We were looking at this 7 days, 10 days out. We're all pumped up. The public's pumped up about it. And, when it's over, you want your old life back. And
Yeah.
you don't always get that.
Well, and folks at the Weather Service, meteorologists, were people like everyone else. You guys
Yes.
were impacted, but to keep that level of coordination, because it's one thing for a storm to come in quickly and move away, but after the fact of the storm, I mean, your level of coordination with with all the relief that was coming in, folks from the federal government that were coming in, you just kind of talk about a little bit of maybe what it was like in the days, the weeks, and the months after Katrina.
I think there was a really strong push from what I remember to get as much information as we could on the web about the details of Katrina. Really a lot of impact related information. If you notice or visit the National Weather Service Mobile's homepage, there's a page for Hurricane Katrina. And that page was used every single day afterwards, and it was constantly evolving, constantly changing as more information came available. And people were putting their lives back together. The employees were extremely tired, but we all rebounded. We all rebounded, and we did what we had to do at the time that we had to do it, and we were proud of it. The leadership of the office was very proud of the employees and the personal sacrifices that they made with their families. I watched the employees back one another up to go board their own personal windows up. People covered shifts for people, and this was all in advance of the storm.
Yeah.
So it was really trying times.
Yeah, for sure. And going back to the National Weather Service in Mobile's webpage for Katrina, you wrote that.
I did write that. And one thing I remember is I've never had so many calls from engineers and law firms, not just in the weeks or months after, but years after. At one point, I know that it was ranked one of the most highly or most often visited web pages in the entire, actually it rivaled for the entire government.
Well, I don't doubt that at all. And I think that's another good talking point for us to talk about, is because after big events impact our local area, our friends at the Weather Service write up descriptions of those events.
That's right.
So in a world today where so many folks have moved down to the Gulf Coast that maybe aren't familiar with hurricanes or just some of the storms that are capable down here, they can go to these web pages and kind of get a sense of what the past has brought us.
That's correct, and that's a very important point you make, because after Ivan and we had Katrina, and then for the few years after, then we could say most people have experienced a hurricane. But then now we look at things, and then especially right before Sally, it had dropped down to like maybe 1 in 3 have ever experienced a hurricane. So those pages are very important to help you and your family make your preparedness plan and decide what is best for you and your personal situation. And it gives you time to hone it. And you can also use what happened with these web pages to gain an idea of what the impacts might look like.
Yeah.
And one of the things we're always up against is we're writing these when we are at our tiredest. The event is over, but what we've learned through the years is that we just want to get credible information out that we know of as much as we can, as quick as we can, and there's always time to make it more thorough and more in-depth later.
Yeah, because you guys are always, or when you were at the Weather Service, you guys were always constantly updating things, maybe getting new information, getting new pictures that you're able to
Correct.
to throw in those things.
That is correct.
Well, and then kind of going back to Ivan, because I'm glad that you brought that up again. The recency bias with Ivan the year before, I know getting prepared for Katrina was a tall tale task, being from the Mississippi Gulf Coast. But
Yes.
Having Ivan the year before, did it make it that much a little bit easier for the messaging to get out to say, hey, people, make sure that you take this seriously?
As I recall, it absolutely did. But for example, there's still things like, the east side of Ivan was more Baldwin County and Pensacola, whereas the western side of Ivan was Mobile County. Well, it's hard to equate what happened in Pensacola and Baldwin County to Mobile. And then I think Katrina finally solidified all along the coast the carnage and disaster. But it did, in general, to answer your first question, it did in general make it easy that these things can happen. We hadn't had one in a long time. And until Ivan and Katrina, all you would hear here is Hurricane Frederick.
Yes.
That was the benchmark. And it just solidifies that we should not really refer, when we're dealing with a landfalling system that's potential, like if we have something next week, we really shouldn't make historical references, because every one of these tropical cyclones, they are unique and they have their own DNA with impacts.
And Katrina, maybe case in point,
Yes.
wasn't a 5 when it came inland.
That's right. It was a 3. It was a 3, and it made a double landfall, but it had such a large radius and was pushing such an envelope of water.
Yeah.
And that's just further proof. I mean, a good strong 1 or low end 2 that's a large diameter system can mess you up more than you think with storm surge inundation.
Well, and more recently, for example, Sally, with how slow it was moving, even though
Yes.
it's a 2, its impacts were basically major hurricane level.
That is correct. That is correct.
And so we'll go ahead and wind things down. But Hurricane Katrina, it's hard to believe that we're talking about something that was 20 years ago. But what are some of the lessons learned from Katrina that still very much apply today, that you think?
I think the one thing is that, once you've decided in your mind and it's pretty clear cut that maybe a system's going to make landfall to your west and you're on the east side of a system, particularly if it's large diameter, the impacts are amplified. It also reminds us greatly, once again, that impacts occur well outside of the cone. Do not focus on the skinny black line. It just reinforces all of the things that have been said all along.
Okay. And then back in 2005, I'm glad you brought up the forecast cone. The forecast cone is was a little bit wider
Yes.
than it is now.
Yes.
So just what you've seen with the technological advancements and the forecasting when it comes to hurricanes just since 2005.
The supercomputers that we have today are able to run the same models, and the physics of the models themselves evolve. But the cone, the width of the cone at certain forecast hours is based on the past historical error. And we all see that the cones are getting skinnier, and especially since 2005. That means that the computer models are able to make a better forecast. And so, that is greatly improved. Although I will say that even for back then, Ivan and Katrina, those forecasts were fairly accurate.
Yeah.
Because they were so large and had such a large scale signature. It was just a matter of the last 12 hours and trying to get it right. So, but yes, we're in a much better place today with things like that. I think a lot of the attention today is turned into the systems that might be a 1 or something like that, and then they experience rapid intensification right before landfall.
Yeah.
Those are things we still have not gotten good at.
Well, and I think it would be hard for any forecast model to
Yes.
actually resolve rapid intensification going from a tropical storm to a Category 5 within a matter of days.
Yes, exactly. And Michael in 2018, I believe it was a great example of it became a 5 right before the Florida Panhandle. So
And that just goes back to make sure that you're always prepared.
that's correct.
You never want to wait until something is in the Gulf to kind of have that plan ready to go.
That's correct.
So thank you once again for coming to talk about Hurricane Katrina. But even though you're no longer the meteorologist in charge at the National Weather Service in Mobile, you're still extremely active
Yes.
in the weather field and the weather community. And I was wanted you to be able to tell the folks at home kind of what
Yes.
you're up to these days.
Well, thank you for that. Yes, I retired in 2022, and then I maybe got even busier, as if I wasn't busy enough before. But I started teaching classes at South Alabama because I feel it's important to give back some of the knowledge that I've put into my head over the years, my experiences. That makes a difference when you stand in front of folks and you can tell them what you've been through. Also, did a little bit of forecasting for the USA's Coastal Weather Research Center. Currently, I'm doing severe thunderstorm and tornado outlooks out to 6 to 10 days, and I also do the winter weather. The third thing I did since retirement is about a year ago, I started my own consulting business, Medlin Meteorological Consulting, and I've gotten into the field of expert witness.
Very nice. So I think it's probably fair to say is once you get involved with weather, weather never leaves you.
That's right. It's all I ever wanted to do since I could say the word weather. I was brought into this by my maternal grandmother, who had a passion for weather, and I've always I could not imagine wanting to do or doing anything else.
Okay. And if folks wanted to maybe see some of your work, especially the National Weather Service in Mobile, the webpage for Katrina,
Yes.
just maybe were a couple things that maybe they could see those.
Yeah, you can go to weather.gov and go through the past events, significant events. You can see some of the web pages that have been put together. And then some of the other local phenomena here, like the sea breeze, and I've done quite a bit of work on Hurricane Danny and proving where the maximum of rainfall fell with that. I'm published in the literature, and you just do a Google search on the AMS or NWA.
Okay.
You can see some of that work.
Well, Jeffrey, thank you so much for taking the time. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate
I appreciate it. I enjoyed it, and thank you for allowing us to. I think there's some stories here that were told today that people don't realize, and I think that's the value. And the whole impetus was so that people can see how their local weather service serves them and what goes on behind the scenes. And even though I'm not an employee anymore, I worked there for 36 years, and it's still very near and dear to my heart. And that's speaking from the heart. So I want people to know what we do and who we are.
Well, and I'll leave the folks at home with this. The National Weather Service in Mobile is an incredible office. I mean, you had such an important hand at that, but they are such incredible partners to be able to work with. So again, thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Enough.
Thanks.